All right, so part two of our Strategic Petroleum Reserve SPR deep dive. Just a reminder in part one, if you want to go back and watch that, we went over the basic history of the SPR, the geographic location, and talked a little bit about how these are salt caverns and not on above ground storage facilities. We talked about the size of the SPR, congressionally mandated sales, where Congress is signing into law requirements to sell down some of the oil over time. That's happened a lot over the last decade. And then some of the emergency sales and exchanges that we've had. So emergency sales under the Biden administration in 2021, 2022, really. And then the current program that we're in, the exchange program under the Trump administration. So we went over the basics of all of that, gave kind of an idea of where we see the SPR drawing down to and then refilling over time. So if you're interested, take a look at that. It's a pretty quick video. You'll get a good rundown of it. Today we'll do a deep dive on one of the facilities and its related infrastructure. We're going to talk about the Bryan Mound facility. This is, and let me just switch over to slides. I know I showed this slide on part one, but just to orient geographically of what we're going to be talking about. This is the Bryan Mound facility. This is the furthest southwest facility, and it is the biggest facility. As you can see, 247 million barrels of storage capacity at this facility. Just switch to the next slide here. The DOE website does have a pretty good information on some of the SPR stuff. They have annual reports to Congress, although they haven't done one for several years, which is weird. So the latest one I think is from 2022, but it gives basics on what's going on at the SPR. So this is where the left side of this comes from, where you can see they talk about Bryan Mound, 19 active caverns to store the stuff. You can see the drawdowns, how fast they can pull out sour and sweet crude on a daily rate, and then the 225,000 barrels per day to refill is a slower process. They also have these subway maps, which are useful to show kind of the distribution network, and they have one of these for each of the kind of facilities. This is the Bryan Mound facility. I do think this is really useful. I think it's easier to see on and explain on the Plainview platform, so we'll jump into that one next. But it is useful to see all the interconnected pipes that the SPR can directly or indirectly access. So let's jump in, and I just wanted to give kind of a 30,000 foot view plus of where this infrastructure and facility sits. So you're southwest of the Houston area in the Freeport area. So we'll zoom in here. I'm going to switch to satellite so we can see some of this infrastructure. So this is the Bryan Mound facility. I know I talked about it and showed a slide on it in part one. Again, these are not above ground storage tanks. These are underground caverns where we're injecting the oil into the cavern. That's how it works. That's how we're storing that oil. So this is the facility. We do have some, with Texas being a pretty good one. We can see kind of, this is a little bit weird. This is what they're pulling out of storage. So you can see kind of the storage, like the pulls out of storage that they did in 2021 and 2022 under the Biden release. And then you can see some of the refill that's happened in 2025. They did refill some of that. There has been barrels that have been pulled out recently in April and May. We don't have the data for that yet, but you will see large negative numbers here, which represent oil being pulled out of this facility. And as you can see who you might imagine, large refiners and marketers that are pulling the barrels out of here. So where do the barrels go when they come out of the SPR and go back in? How do they get in and out? That's pretty important to think about. There's a few options here with the Bryan Mound facility. So the pipeline that you see here are actually DOE-owned pipelines. So the Department of Energy, the old U.S. taxpayer, owns these pipelines. I would mention, and I'll just show it really quick here. Let's do this. Exxon leases this pipeline. So I'm going to turn this off. As you can see, the dashed line here. Exxon leases these pipelines from the DOE and allows them to move oil on their Hoops or Hoover system onshore to Texas City and to Jones Creek if they want to move them there. The Jones Creek line is back, it appears to be back in service now after being offline for a while. But Exxon uses this to move oil from offshore, onshore. They have a long-term lease. The lease runs out in 2030 to lease this DOE pipeline and move the barrels into Texas City. Now, when there's SPR withdrawals or they need to put oil back in, the DOE does get priority service on this pipeline, so they do get to still use this pipeline. So again, just something I wanted to mention, that this pipeline is used by Exxon most of the time, but when there's SPR releases, the DOE does use it. So a few options. Again, this is the Bryan Mound facility. You can go a few different ways with your oil once you pull it out of here. You can, number one, you can move it to the Seaway dock. So Seaway, the pipeline Seaway is owned by, it's a 50-50 JV with Enbridge and Enterprise. They have a export dock here, and some of the oil definitely flows this way on releases. Certainly the recent releases, it appears that there's been oil that's been flowing this way. They get exports, it could be exported to other U.S. markets via a Jones Act tanker or an international market via a regular ship. Other options, you can go north to Texas City. So this is a 40-inch pipeline, so they can carry barrels north to Texas City. At Texas City, there are refineries, as you can see. I'm going to turn those on. So here are the refineries. There's the Galveston Bay refinery. There's Texas City's Valero refinery. So you have basically direct access to these refineries here. There's another Seaway export dock here that the barrels can flow onto. And then there's some distribution networks where they can probably move around and get down into Galveston and some other places with the oil. Genesis has a terminal here that these barrels can dump into, as well as I think Seaway has some storage here as well that they can dump into. So those are our options for going. We have an option going to the export docks. We have an option going to Texas City to hit some refineries or exports. And you also have an option to go to this Jones Creek storage facility. Jones Creek has storage tanks owned by Phillips 66 and also Seaway. So both of those are viable options for barrels flowing this way. I think I mentioned earlier, this line was offline for a period of time. I think in 2017, Hurricane Harvey damaged this pipeline. It was offline. It was set to come back online. Exxon actually redid this pipeline as part of their lease agreement. It was set to come back line in 2024. I'm not sure if they hit that date, but it does appear to be back online now based on some of the receipt and delivery options to this Jones Creek area that one of the recent exchange RFPs offered. So I do think this pipeline's back online, and this pipeline allows you to get to Jones Creek. From Jones Creek, you can feed into, and I'll pull it up here, you can feed into the Sweeney pipeline. So this is Phillips 66's pipeline that can get you to the Sweeney refinery here. You can also feed into Seaway. So Seaway pipeline, I mentioned it earlier with some of their docks. This is the orange. On Seaway, you can flow north, I believe, up into like the Enterprise's Echo terminal, which can get you essentially to most of the Houston refineries from there. So you have very good connectivity with this system. So Bryan Mound can kind of get you all around the Houston area, Texas City area. You can get to export docks. One thing I'd like to mention, it's worth mentioning, with some of the changes that we've had in the flow dynamics of some of the pipelines in recent years, is you used to be able to, before kind of the shale revolution and we had significant increases in production in Canada, most of the pipelines actually flowed, I'll just draw it here, U.S. imported a lot of oil from in the Gulf area, and a lot of the pipelines actually flowed north and fed these mid-continent or Midwest refineries. So you had Capline coming up this way. The production increases in places like PADD 4, places like the Permian, Canada, made it so all these pipelines, or essentially all the pipelines, reverse their capacity and come south. So this is important because it effectively has cut off a lot of these, basically all these SPRs from being able to flow barrels north to feed these Midwest refineries. Now, is that big of a deal? Probably not. I mean, if there's a severe disruption up in Canada or in Pad 4 where we're losing millions of barrels a day, yeah, it could be a problem. But remember, we have excess supply of crude coming down from Canada, coming in from Pad 4. Those barrels flow to the Gulf Coast already. So if there's a disruption up here, you can release from the SPR and basically replace the barrels that were coming this way. And then the excess barrels can just stay up here in the Midwest. So it's something to think about, that we've maybe lost a little bit of the capability, of a little bit of the flexibility of being able to flow barrels north out of the SPR. But I don't think it's that big of a deal just because you have displacement options. But anyways, I hope this was useful. I'm going to just turn off Seaway and Sweeney again quick so you guys can see. Again, this is the infrastructure around Bryan Mound. Bryan Mound has the ability to go to Jones Creek, Freeport Export, or Texas City. Potential midstream upsides when there's SPR releases. Seaway probably sees some upside. And then probably less so a little bit for Exxon, given that they own the lease on this pipeline. They're probably collecting some fees on that as well. So part 3, we will talk about Big Hill and West Hackberry. They're kind of connected. So we'll talk. I think we'll do just one on those, maybe be a little bit longer. But hopefully this was useful. Please reach out if you want to try out the platform. And I hope everybody has a great week.